morning, and thanks Samantha and Jordan for all the work you're doing, and Luke and others who have been so involved in kind of ramping up to this day of prayer. It's a good thing. You guys back, you can sit, the floor's not, just because there's a cross here, actually it's kind of cool to be around the cross, so feel free to come on up, sit on the floor. You can even come close to me, I'm okay with that. Anyone? Okay. Dude, thank you. You're my new best friend. Here we go. The converts are coming. All right. That's enough. By the way, somebody from Minnesota, anybody from Minnesota here? Yeah. Well, there's a place there called Dunn Brothers Coffee, and somebody brought me a sticker back from Dunn Brothers Coffee, as you can see here. So I put it on my Bible. Cool place. Dunn Brothers Coffee. This chapel brought to you by Dunn Brothers Coffee. So any of you, as any of you follow, as you follow the recent events in Egypt, and there's so much going on in our world today, you've seen how kind of an oppressed people have been liberated. And it's amazing what's happening just through some tweets and Facebook messages, how people have kind of rallied together. And now Egypt, for the first time in 30 years, is in this post-Mubarak phase. And it's not just Egypt where this is going on right now. As you know, it's in Bahrain, it's in Iran, in Libya, in Tunisia, in Yemen, all around the Mediterranean region. There's this yearning for an oppressed people to be freed from that oppression and from those injustices. And this is nothing new. Around the Middle East, even in Egypt, as a matter of fact, Egypt, if you go back to Exodus chapter 2, the end of the chapter, it talks there about how God's people were groaning, they were crying out. The injustices were so bad under this tyrannical despot of a leader in Pharaoh that things just didn't seem fair. And so when the people cried out in their oppression, it says in verse 24 and 25 of Exodus chapter 2, that says, God heard, God remembered, God looked on them, God was concerned. And what was it he remembered? He didn't remember just recent history. He actually went back to the covenant. It says he remembered the covenant. He remembered that moment when he said, I want my people to be that fragrance for me. I want my people to be about sharing the good news with every nation, the breadth, and every generation, the depth. That's what God remembered. So that's what's happening at the end of Exodus chapter 2, when God remembers his covenant, and he remembers his calling on his people, that through his people all nations on earth would be blessed. And you can't help but thinking that this is kind of the antecedent to the Great Commission. So what does God do next? You've got a people that are feeling the injustices there in Egypt. Sounds very familiar to today. There's been that kind of oppression. God hears, God remembers, God is concerned, and God calls. So this is the context that we have as we get into Exodus chapter 3, which begins with Moses. Remember Moses, he was that kind of well-heeled, well-educated Hebrew who was once prominent in the schools of Egypt, but now he's been banished from the courts of Pharaoh. And we find Moses, beginning in chapter 3, as a shepherd. He's a shepherd there for his father-in-law, Jethro, working there on the backside of a desert, far out of earshot of the moans and the crying of his brothers and sisters, his family, back in the city. So Moses was about to find out, as he's thinking about this, well-educated, he's probably going like, what am I doing like with a job like this? I've got a great education. Hopefully you're not going to ask that question one day. But what am I doing with a job like this? I'm I'm hustling sheep, working for my father-in-law. Really, no one's around me. And I hope that you, as you think about this, Biola students, begin to say, okay, are there some lessons here about when there's a needy people and how God calls somebody to be that voice of redemption to those needy people? Maybe there's something that we can draw on from today during this day of prayer. So here we have Moses in the desert, where his sensitivity to God's will begins to be honed. And that's often where it happens, in that desert place when things don't seem to be going as you planned for them to go, that God begins to speak. And you know the story on that rather ordinary day when he was at work leading the sheep on the kind of the backside of the desert out near Sinai. He comes across this bush, and the bush is engulfed in flames. And it says the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire. And as Moses, out of curiosity for this pyrotechnic display of phenomena in front of him, he moves up closer to this bush. And God says to him, Moses, Moses. And he says, here I am. Well, the first thing that Moses needs to understand is that ordinary desert is really an extraordinary place, not because he's there, but because God is there. So the Lord said to him, don't come near. I want you to take off your shoes, take them off your feet, for the place you're standing is holy ground. So the story says that Moses, he bent down, unstrapped his laces, he kind of approached that bush barefoot, that consuming fire right there, and God said to Moses, I want you to go. Those people that are oppressed and facing all these injustices, I want you to go. I want you to go set my people free. And how does Moses respond? He responds by saying, verse 11, he says, who am I? Who am I to go back? I'm a fugitive. Who am I to go back to Pharaoh? He said, who am I? Because he used to be somebody, but now he feels like he's a nobody. He's kind of a fugitive from the law. He said, who am I? Because he actually wanted somebody else to do it. He said, who am I? Because he was just hustling sheep for a living. He said, who am I? Because he had this stammering tongue. He said, who am I? Because he didn't think anyone was going to believe that fiery bush tale. He said, who am I? Because he actually wanted somebody else to take on the challenge. And God says to Moses, you don't understand. When I'm calling you because of who I am, not because of who you are. And Moses said, well, who are you? If I go back to the people of Israel, who am I going to say is sending me? And God says those words that are virtually untranslatable and indescribable when he says to Moses, you go back and you tell them that I am who I am has sent me to you. These are words of authority. These are empowering words. These are words that the barefoot Moses heard before the burning bush. When he said, who am I? God says, it doesn't matter who you are. It's who I am, and I am who I am. And these words of authority kind of cast our eyes forward to the Great Commission, when you and I are called. And Jesus says, all authority, right, has been given to me in heaven and earth. Therefore, you can go and make disciples. But you can only go not because of who you are. God says, because who I am. This week's about DTR, right, defining the relationship. And I think we need to understand there's a relational definition that we have to understand of who we are and who God is. And it's beginning to take shape, this definition there, with a barefoot Moses standing in front of this fiery bush, and he hears these words of authority, because Moses begins to realize if he returns to Egypt on his own authority and says, hey, Pharaoh, let my people go, he knows he's going to be a colossal failure. But his authority was only as strong as the authority of the one who sent him, who said, you go out in my authority and you don't go out on your own. So there's Moses standing in front of that bush, asking the question, who am I? And God responds, I am who I am. I am the God who is. I am the God who acts on behalf of my people. I am the God who fulfills my redemptive purposes. I am the God who relates to you. I am the God who is with you. So it doesn't matter who you are, it matters who I am. And if you understand the rightful perspective of my role as the I am who I am and your role as the who am I, you're going to be okay. This is my name. God says right there in verse 15, the name that I'm going to be remembered by from generation to generation. That's from that generation to our generation today. That name that proclaims God's eternal, self-sustaining, self-determining, sovereign, transcending reality, the living, the reigning, the powerful, and the inexhaustible God that burning bush showed him to be. The bush that was burning but wasn't consumed. So here's the thought that we need to ponder in our generation. What does that mean when we here at Biola University come before God and he says, I am who I am? I hope you can begin to feel this morning how important these words are, especially on a day like today when we're focusing on understanding our rightful position as we come before God in prayer. Remember in verse 11, Moses asked that question, who am I? In verse 14, God responds to that question by saying, I am who I am. We are the who am I. God is the I am who, right? The I am who I am. Moses, I believe, was the perfect candidate to be the one called by God to go and set these oppressed people free, to go and be a voice of justice amidst all this injustice, to be the voice of redemption among these broken people. He was a perfect candidate because he asked that question. That question, who am I? Who am I to go? Who am I to lead? Who am I in my own inadequacies? Who am I in my own failures? Who am I in this with this job that no one even notices? Who am I that now that I'm forgotten, having been a somebody at one point, I am a nobody here on the backside of the desert. Who am I? He was the perfect candidate because he struggled with his own worthiness. He wrestled with his own importance and values. And we need students like that here at Biola today who will emphasize with love and with humility and with brokenness the eternal truths of God's I am who I am. Students who are filled with the Holy Spirit, who are broken before him, who pray helplessly that God will do something great in our generation, who have a hunger and a passion for God's word, who don't think that they're worthy, who see the injustices around them and say, Lord, I want to do something about that, but I can't do it in and of myself because I am a who am I. But Lord, you in all of your great splendor and all of your triumphant I am who I am, you do something through me. This is what Moses, with his shoes off of his feet, was beginning to get standing there before the burning bush. Defining the relationship. The unworthy takes off shoes. The one worthy is a blazing fire. Never confuse our rightful relationship, defined long ago by that burning fire on the backside of the desert in the shadow of Mount Sinai, when God said, in response to Moses' who am I? God said, I am who I am. Those powerful words that mean that God doesn't have any subjectivity to him or relativism to him. He didn't say, we are who we are, right? He didn't try to make it so, in some kind of pluralistic relativism, I can be who I can be. That's not how God responded. He responded, I am who I am. And when he did, Moses stood there with his shoes off his feet and realized how unworthy he was and how worthy God was. And that voice of God spoke to Moses out of that fire. So why did he speak out of a fire? Why didn't he speak out of like a bowl of clam chowder? You know, God can speak out of anything, right? He can speak out of a donkey's mouth, out of a rock. He can speak out of anything. But he chose, for some reason, to speak out of a fire. Well, why did God speak out of a fire? And I have to believe that it was for Moses and for all of us who open our lives to a holy God and to allow the Spirit of God to work through us to understand that the nature of God is to draw us closer to his purifying power. This is what happens in the flame. This is this biblical theophany when God reveals himself in this flame to Moses. And as he did, he was trying to get across to Moses this DTR thing, that defining the relationship is everything. I am the one who says, I am who I am. And you are, Moses, the one who asks that question of unworthiness. Who am I? You're barefoot, Moses, and I'm the fire. So it's not just knowing about God. We do a lot of that here at Biola University, the understanding of knowing about God and the courses that we take and the thinking that we do, but it's standing before the fire of God to melt us, to refine us, to allow ourselves to be broken before him, to purify us, to allow God's love in us to be rekindled anew. That's why this prayerfully conceived theme of the missions conference next month is called Set Us Ablaze. Standing before the fire of God so that it ignites us. And as it ignites us, it not only sets us ablaze to be his voice of redemption to that which is broken in this world, but sets us ablaze to purify us and to cleanse us, to be that redeeming voice within us. So as we come to know God more here at Biola University, we cannot lose the fire in our heart that's ignited and fueled by God alone. And for this reason, we take off our shoes and we come helplessly before the one who said, I am who I am. And we allow him to do his work in us, because outside of the walls and even within the walls of this university, there are people that are suffering. There are injustices. There's oppression. There's brokenness. And if we're going to be the ones to take that on, we can't take it on in our own worthiness. But we can only take it on as we understand our unworthiness and the one who is ultimately worthy, the one who spoke out of that fire. From that bush came the inextinguishable fire of God that surrounds his glory and the purifying power that attends his presence. God is about lighting the fire. We're about taking off our shoes. That's the definition of the relationship defined long ago with Moses in a burning bush. Moses, the one who asked that question, who am I? And God responded, it doesn't matter, because I am with you, and the one who is with you is the eternal, inexhaustible I am who I am. God's about lighting the fire, and we're about taking off shoes. So called by God to take the gospel to the world, we have to experience in our hearts that white, hot fire of God that refines us, that purifies us, and that points us to his glorious presence. That fire that sets us ablaze and calls us to go and be the people of redemption to a broken and to a needy world.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.